Achtung, you are listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk in our little series of chats with people from the other side of the Atlantic, from the USA. And James, who have we got today?
Well, today we've got Marty Morgan, who I'm very excited about having on the podcast because Marty is a real expert in kind of weaponry, Normandy, the Battle of the Bulge, all sorts of things. And he's another of these fellows who's a historian who's sort of coming at this whole subject from a slightly different angle, not the traditional kind of sort of sitting there with his corduroy jacket on in his wainscoted study, kind of poring over books. Of course, you do all that as well, Marty, I know, but you're kind of, you're much more of a sort of practical fellow who likes to get out and kind of do the experiential stuff and all the rest of it. You're a consultant on Call of Duty. You've consulted on Band of Brothers and the Pacific and various other sort of things, and you've led battlefield tours, so you know what you're about, and it's very good to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to be with you.
Now, Marty, what's James and I have talked about this before on the podcast. The thing that got us interested in this subject, and that it has led to this podcast and us seeking out fellow the afflicted, we call them, other people afflicted with this passion for this subject. What's your sort of what's your origin story, as it were? How did you get into the subject?
Oh, I was lucky enough to have been raised by a United States Army officer. My father was in the Army from 59 until 81, and so I was born in 69 and raised around the environment of the U.S. Army, born on and raised on a U.S. Army post where my father's men were all sort of surrogate uncles. That was in addition to the fact that my grandfather was in the Second World War and my uncle was in the Second World War, and the two of them together got me very interested. I was, in other words, in my childhood, around nothing but people who had either fought the Second World War or were currently in uniform and serving the American military. In addition to that, I was raised in the 70s, and you guys might remember it was just nothing but awesome movie after awesome movie about the Second World War.
So what's your all-time favorite?
Wow, I really like Bridge Too Far a lot.
Ah!
Yeah,
bingo.
I can't get enough of them. Yeah.
This is just going better and better, to be honest, Marty.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
So
you should know
that
you should know that Al has, I think obsession is the right word, with Market Garden.
Yeah,
oh, really?
Absolutely. My father was an airborne soldier from the late 50s, and then as a reservist, a TA guy until the early 80s. All of the cadre of officers he sort of served with to start with in the mid to late 50s had been at Arnhem. Were guys who were at Arnhem. He knew Mackay, because he was a sapper, he was an engineer. So he knew Eric Mackay, who fought in the schoolhouse on the bridge.
Right.
He knew all those characters, and we would go to Normandy for our summer holidays, and he took me to Arnhem when I was 14. I did a history project about Arnhem for my O levels, for the exams you do when you're 16. That got a highest commendation thing when I was a kid. I was so.
But you also used to watch A Bridge Too Far with your dad, didn't you?
Yes. Well, my dad took me to see it at the cinema, and I remember him getting up and fulminating at the leopard tank that's in it.
The tank.
It's like, it's the wrong bloody tank when this tank comes over the bridge. Anyway, so that's interesting that, and of course we had Action Man, who's G.I. Joe. We had Airfix models. There was a sort of slice of khaki glamour in British culture in the 70s as well. So it's interesting to hear that. That's basically identical to me.
I love it.
Marvelous.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that really fascinates me is that you, as well as doing this as being an actual historical expert on this, you're bringing it into popular culture, because video games as an interface for people with the history of the Second World War it's a really important point of contact, isn't it, between a more academic view of thing and then an experiential entertainment idea, isn't it?
It's reaching more people than anything I'm ever going to write, anything that Max Hastings is ever going to write, anything that James Holland is ever going to write. The video games have more reach capability than anything possible, which is why I think they have replaced the glamorous action movies of the 1970s. And it's interesting because it's almost like you've sat in meetings that I have with the team over we're constantly exploring the extent to which the game should be informed by actual events and reality. And their objective is to make things extremely engaging and extremely dynamic. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be historically accurate, which is the point at which they engage me and use me for a lot of feedback. It's fascinating because you would think that it's just some crusty old person that watched movies in the 70s and read a bunch of books that tells them, no, that's wrong, do this. And it's a far broader interaction than just that. And I enjoy being a part of it. And I think it's the most productive way to expose a new generation to the history of the Second World War.
So what's the kind of stuff you're advising them on? I mean, would you just say, well, that seems great, but they would have never done that, or the I don't know, the winter smock that German trooper's using is the wrong type, or what's it?
There's a lot of stitch counting that goes on, which does not give me the greatest reputation for being anything other than a complete nerd. But I'm because I'm calling out things that it's funny because in our world, I'm including the two of you in this world, by the way. In our world, there are things that don't seem outrageous or ridiculous. To, for example, call out the most recent Call of Duty release that I was part of was Call of Duty World War II that came out in 2017. And they depicted a main character with an M1928 A1 Thompson submachine gun. And they had him in the Hurtgen Forest with the 50-round drum magazine. And when I saw that, I had a commission fail. I was like, oh, no, absolutely no use of 50-round drum magazines whatsoever in Northern Europe. And to them, that is an outrageously hilarious thing to see a nerd meltdown like that. And to me, I look at them like, what could you possibly say negative to my reaction to that? I felt like my reaction was very measured and controlled. And to them, they just thought it was some wild meltdown. So there's a little bit of that going on, stitch counting absurdity. I do work with the weapons team quite a bit. And that is in terms of not just advising them on what weapons are appropriate, but also the team will travel here to Louisiana and we will go out on a piece of property near where I live and conduct actual audio sampling of the weapons that end up in the game. So when you listen to firearms from Call of Duty World War II, they're firearms from my collection or from the collection of my dealer. And that, I believe, exposes those designers. It's the audio team almost exclusively, but it's exposing them to some realities of World War II firepower that I think inform the way that they approach the game, which I kind of wish everybody could do. I've been leading tours in Normandy for almost 20 years now. And one thing that I am finding is that for the most part, when people come to Normandy and it's a first experience and they're not people who have gotten into recreational shooting or collecting military surplus firearms, that there's an enormous amount of chauvinistic pre-information that's in them that I have to fight against, which is why I suggest
I would agree with that.
Yeah, there's overwhelming. It's to the point where I end up spending more time talking about Saving Private Ryan, which is a movie that's based on things that, for the most part, did not actually happen. I end up spending more time talking about that than things that actually happened.
Okay, well, I don't want to completely make you go through that all over again, but just in 2 minutes, what's your beef with the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan?
It's a great scene. However, what it does is it leaves the powerful impression that the entire breadth, the 5-mile width of Omaha Beach was one vicious bloodletting, which it wasn't.
Which it wasn't.
There were pockets of intensity.
Right.
And through the pornification of the subject matter, they chose the pocket that provided the greatest possible intensity, which is something that's very motion picture and video game. And I get that. What that does, though, for people that have not spent a lifetime around the subject is that when they arrive and they, for example, stand at Dog Green Sector and they connect that to the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, they immediately trigger this very interesting thought process. And it is that they immediately become hypercritical of the leadership that chose that as a time and place of battle. And when I mention that, it's they turn it into something that I believe is a narrative that very powerfully belongs to the post-1975 time period, the post-Vietnam era in American history, where it is fashionable to be disenchanted. It's fashionable to be cynical. It's fashionable to engage. It's a narrative that goes back to the First World War, where we blame the leaders.
It's lions led by donkeys, isn't it?
Precisely, lions led by donkeys. They suddenly shift into gear and immediately go, what idiots decided that Omaha Beach was the place to fight? And I then have to very surgically deconstruct that chauvinism and try to go, no, some of the most intelligent people on the planet Earth conceived this battle. And when they conceived this battle, it was with no casual disregard for the lives of the common soldier. They were sensitively aware of the fact that they might lose lives. And they attempted to construct a battle space that would conserve lives to the greatest extent possible. But yeah. I end up basically fighting this slogging match with people where they want to go, the generals were all so stupid. The generals were all so foolish to fight here. And I find
it was a slaughter. It's bloody Omaha, isn't it? It's kind of you're right. It's this perception, it's wholesale slaughter. And when you tell people that in total for Omaha Beach, 842 or whatever it was, Allied soldiers lost their lives, which is a lot, but most people assume it's kind of 2,000, 3,000.
Right, and exactly. And I also find that it's very difficult to pull people down off of the ledge of the way that casualty figures get listed. Because in their reading, they're used to saying D-Day casualties 10,000. They assume that means 10,000 killed. And I very carefully then have to pull them back from that. I also think that the opening scene of Private Ryan has created an entire discourse of its own that I call MG42 determinism. And that is, I've named it. I've named the baby. And I call it that because of literally two very quick clips in the opening sequence that are shot from over the shoulder of an MG42 gunner who, for reasons that remain completely unknown to me, is completely unprotected by concrete or wood or sandbags. In other words, it's the Hollywood created scene is of a gunner firing from the bipod, which is something that's just not done that often, particularly in fixed fortifications. He's firing from the bipod, and he's just ripping a belt in one big burst directly down the yawning open bow of the Higgins LCVP and killing everybody on board the boat.
Because this machine gun is also incredibly accurate and can fire at kind of, God knows how many bullets, 1,500 bullets a minute. And what hope do our brave young men have against this mighty machine?
That's precisely it. And I find it to be a fascinating thing that I believe is, I'll just go ahead and, let the pony out of the pen here, but I believe that it is entirely mythology.
Yep.
And one thing that I've attempted to do in basically all of my work, basically everything associated with Normandy, is I'm doing a lot of revisionist history. Revisionism can be a very good thing. Many people believe it's always bad, but it can be an extremely
it's the revisionism. Thing. When you say you're revisionist, it's got a kind of sort of dirty word stigma, hasn't it? But actually, it isn't because what you're actually what good revisionism should be is actually asking questions and not accepting a kind of mythologized truth that doesn't have any truth at all. And the Second World War is just full. The narrative of World War II is just full of those mythologies which have become a kind of truth.
It's full of essential non sequiturs in lots of its explanations, isn't it? All sorts of things about the way the Second World War is told. You demand the question, well, if that's the case, how come that something else happened? If that's the case, why was the result different? When I went to the Borgibu Ridge a very long time ago with a veteran of the Goodwood campaign, he said, I've read Max Hastings' book. If we did such a terrible job, how did I ever get up here? How did we get onto this ridge if apparently we didn't? And I think so much of this stuff is very hardwired into people. And again, it's a thing we see on our Twitter feed where we'll be talking about a subject and someone will pop up with the received wisdom that then that explains nothing. If that's how you're describing this event, it doesn't explain what actually transpired, or if you see what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. This is why, as I've led tours in Normandy for almost 20 years now, I've had to present the packages of information to people, the Omaha Beach package, the package related to Utah, the package related to the American airborne drop zone areas. As I've presented those packages, I've attempted to reconcile multiple different narratives into a single narrative. Every tour guide has to do this at some point. And they're often conflicting. And as I attempted to reconcile, because I remember the era prior to Saving Private Ryan. I mean, we could maybe call that BSPR, before Saving Private Ryan. And the era prior to Saving Private Ryan, there wasn't so much of an infatuation with the slaughter machine, the MG-42 machine gun. And people often didn't talk about that. And the narrative was more fixed on mortar fire, which, to be honest, is what is creating most of the casualties on Omaha Beach.
Yes, yeah, so when you look at the statistics across the whole of the Western battlefield, it's mortar fire, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Really,
Absolutely.
It's doing for people.
Yeah, it's mortars and artillery that's doing all of the killing. Small arms fires is really if you bounce small arms fire off of the movie narratives, it's surprising how little small arms fire is actually doing. And right. I have found that to be the case with Omaha Beach, and I have found it to be an extraordinarily challenging thing to take guests who maybe have done a little bit of reading, but have definitely done a little movie watching, to take them to the dog green sector and make that place make sense to them. It's an extremely challenging thing. And one of the areas where I struggle the most is over the firepower that was available to the German troops that were defending Omaha, because there is this overwhelming chauvinistic belief that what Steven Spielberg told them is the truth. And I have been working toward that now I've been working toward it now for over a year, and I'm finding very little documentation relating to MG-42s on Omaha Beach. I'm able to document a few things, none of which are MG-42s, and it's leading me to begin to entertain the possibility that there were none on the beach.
No, wow,
that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, so how many? There's about. I mean, the other thing I think is really interesting is that you go, okay. So how many guns do you think there were on sort of artillery pieces, anti-tank guns, all that kind of stuff, cannons? How many pieces do you think there were protecting those bluffs? We'll park how many are inside. So it's about 32, I think it is. Of which there are, I think I'm right in saying, 2 88 millimeters.
Right.
There's a handful of 75s, and most of them are 50 millimeters. Ranged against them are, I think it's 183 90 millimeter or above.
Right.
And every time, just think about what that means for a machine gunner. So you're on that bluff and you might be in a bunker, you might not be, whatever, but you're on that bluff. Let's just assume you're in some kind of casement, some kind of bunker, concrete bunker position. You've got these shells pounding in. They might not be big enough to kind of actually destroy that bunker, but they're certainly going to be big enough to cause you, unbelievable terror. Lots of grit and dust is going to be flying around you. What are you going to do at the moment that is flying in? You're going to cower and clutch your head and pray to your mum and pray to God. What you're not going to be doing is keeping a cool head and firing your MG-42 and calmly kind of sort of changing over the belts or kind of changing the barrel for the 25th time because it's overheated. I mean, I know there are artillery pieces further inland as well, but it's still absolutely as nothing compared to the kind of combined firepower that the Allies have got out at sea. I mean, it just isn't.
Well, which takes you back to your point, Marty, that this is a battle space the Allies have created. They've loaded the dice. Is the simplest way of looking at it. So what if there weren't MG-42s on Omaha Beach? What was there?
Well, if I could turn your attention to Exhibit A of the material that I submitted previous to this conversation, I've turned this into a court proceeding. Exhibit A is, I think, interesting because the image shows a fighting position of WN-66 in I guess that's toward the western edge of VZ Red. And it's the only photograph that I'm aware of in existence, and I have published 2 books that are photo collections of Normandy. So I feel like I've spent way too much time looking at photos of Normandy and looking at them very closely. This is the only photo that I'm aware of that depicts an actual German machine gun on Omaha Beach, and what it depicts is the MG-08. This brings me to a great opportunity to mention something that I think has contributed to the mythology of associated with this, in that there is a habit among Americans as well as among British troops during the war to reductionize things. Americans are extremely bad about every single tank is a Tiger. I know you're familiar with this and you've heard it a million times. Every tank's a Tiger, and my reaction to that is usually it's actually not. One thing that I'm aware of is that Americans, every machine gun's an MG42, and I'm finding too that in original documentation for British troops, especially, well, not just 3rd Division, but 50th Division, every machine gun's a Spandau.
Yeah.
And there are several, and here's a great example. The action. I think you're probably familiar with that recording that Hollis does after the fact, where he's describing the VC action at Montfleury Battery and the VC, and then the further actions at Crépole. Hollis over and over again refers to a Spandau. And one thing that I have seen over and over again are British troops that are referring to the machine guns as Spandaus. And then I go back and I look and I can't. Spandau is a specific reference to, that's I think dating back to BEF 1914. Yeah. Everything
1914.
Yeah. Every gun was a Spandau, where they're all MG08s. And I think that that's just something that carried over into the Second World War. And
it just means a machine gun, doesn't it?
That's really all it means. It's just a general term of art. And there have been times I've attempted to reconcile British troops referring to a Spandau with what weapon was actually there. And there have been times where it confirmed that it was an MG08, but then there have been times that it was probably something else and not an MG08. And Americans get confused about it too. And the Germans don't help the situation with, if I could turn your attention to Exhibit B.
Yes. So just to go back to Exhibit A, what is Exhibit A?
Exhibit A is a photo from WN66 of a German MG08 Spandau.
That's an MG08, right.
And my experience with both of those particular weapons is that the MG42 in many ways is the worst choice for a fixed beach defensive position, and that the MG08 is by far the best choice. Because I took, in temperatures that are above, there's a weird magic threshold around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, where an air-cooled MG42 is constantly overheating. We, on a rare day where southern Louisiana was below freezing, we took out the MG42 and burned, I think, about 500 rounds through it in a day. It was 27 degrees Fahrenheit, so it was just below freezing. And we found at that temperature, the gun just ate everything up, and we didn't really have to operate it mindful of overheating. We really didn't have to worry about it when it was below freezing. If you get above freezing, and then the closer you get to this threshold temperature of 60 degrees Fahrenheit, the more mindful you have to get. Once you get past 60 degrees Fahrenheit, you really are kind of hobbled by how quickly that firearm overheats itself.
We've got to take a short break right now. We'll be back with Marty Morgan in a minute. Welcome back to We Have Ways. We're talking to Marty Morgan, music to James Holland's ears, I think. So the MG08's a water-cooled gun. It's like it's like the
Maxim gun, isn't it?
Or the Vickers gun,
It's a Maxim design, so yeah, exactly. So that's ideal for a fixed position, isn't it? Because that's not going to overheat. You've got it all under control, haven't you? Absolutely, in every way. And
but Marty, do you also buy into the argument that because obviously we're in an ambush or something like that, having this colossal rate of fire is kind of quite handy. But if you're just trying to mow down people coming off landing craft, that solid kind of 500, 600 round a minute where it gets, I mean, that's a kind of a more effective rate of firepower, isn't it? Because you can, it's better to kill kind of 20 people with one bullet than one person with 20.
In absolutely every way, you're correct. The slower cyclic rate of fire allows the dispersal of shots downrange. When you deliver fire at a longer range, the dispersal of rounds is more compact with the slower cyclic rate of fire. Then you also have an uninterrupted volume of fire, especially when you're dealing with water-cooled weapons. And this is why I argue that the MG42 is in so many ways the wrong choice. What I struggle against there is there's a personal account that greatly complicates my belief and my arguments here. And that's by a German gunner who, well, he wasn't even a gunner, actually. There was a German soldier.
This is Heinz Severloh.
Heinz Severloh, the so-called Beast of Omaha. And I use quotes there and a deliberately sarcastic tone of voice because in every way his account is exaggerated. There are also, in the revisionist in examining the Heinz Severloh personal account, and also in reading his book, the revisionistly minded historian will quickly see a lot of problems with the account. And overwhelmingly, I met him once. I didn't get to spend much time around him. He was sort of an unapproachable figure. But I did spend a lot of time around someone that was in the same complex. It was in the WN 62 complex with him, named Franz Gockel. I spent an enormous amount of time around Gockel.
And he had an 08, didn't he?
He didn't. He actually had, if you can turn to Exhibit B, he was armed and fighting with the Polish WZ-30 machine gun.
Wow.
So the photo, the photo you're seeing there is from Omaha Beach. Gockel's not in the photograph, but this is supposedly a group of men posing at a house near the WN62 complex.
Because I wrote about Gockel in my Normandy book, and I think I said he had an 08. So I need to go. Well, next time there's a reprint, I need to get onto that and get it changed.
Well, the fascinating thing is that it would be extremely easy to mix the two up because they're both water-cooled machine guns. The Polish WZ-30 is a licensed copy of the Browning M1917 machine gun. And the John Browning design differs from the Maxim design and basically just in internal components, but they're both water-cooled machine guns so that they would present a very similar appearance. And Gockel specifically told me Polish machine gun. I flipped through photos because at that point, it could be one of two things. Because the Polish also made use of their weapon that was designated WZ-28, which is the Polish Browning automatic rifle. And so I showed Gockel a photo of the Polish WZ-28 BAR, and he said, nope. I showed him the WZ-30. He said, that's the gun. Huh. And that's kind of a high authority. And it, to me makes sense, and it seems so believable. It's such the absolutely appropriate firearm for that study.
But we also know that the 352nd and the 914th, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was the two infantry units that were there at the time. Yeah. I mean, we know that they're really, really under-equipped. They're not properly equipped. They're not properly equipped with uniforms. They're not properly equipped with weaponry. They're not properly equipped with anything. So at this stage of the war, they're not going to be all equipped with blisteringly shiny, brand new MG42s. It's going to be a hodgepodge of whatever they can get their hands on.
Well, and even then, as Marty's pointed out, the MG42 is the wrong weapon in this scenario. You need a water-cooled gun with a steady rate of fire and so on. So they've actually got the right piece of ordnance.
They did. And a fascinating detail here is that it's a foreign weapon. And James used the word hodgepodge, and I could not conceive of a better word to describe the firepower arming German military forces in Normandy. I also find that when I take tours there to people that have not read deeply into the subject and devoted their lives to it like a complete nerd, I'm finding that they have this pre-chauvinism that everyone that fought in German uniforms was German in Normandy. I'm revealing to them for the first time often that the Germans that were fighting in Normandy were from many different countries, and they were fighting with weapons from many different countries. And that's why, if you get a chance to have a look at Exhibit C, so that's just immediately west of Pointe du Hoc. Yeah, you know it. And this is in the center of downtown Grand Comp, and it's showing a French model 1931 Rebelle machine gun.
Yes.
Which was designed for fortresses and designed for armored vehicles and could be used as an infantry weapon on occasion. I wanted to provide that because when I examine specifically the units that were fighting on the beaches, I find no evidence, no photographic evidence certainly, to show MG42s. What I find is exactly what you said, a hodgepodge. I find French model 1931.
And it makes sense that they've had these French machine guns since 1940. I mean, it's the same as the French tanks that they've got coming across, at Lafayette. I mean, there's one. I think there's one Panzer III leading the charge, but the rest of the tanks are French. They're Samoas, aren't they, or Renaults or something? I can't remember now.
It's two Hotchkiss and one Renault. Yeah.
Right. So and You may be familiar with this book called Small Arms, Artillery and Special Weapons of the Third Reich, an Encyclopedic Survey. And it's a geek book, but it's a fantastically good geek book. And it's got every sort of weapon that the, small arm and artillery piece that the Germans ever used. And 90% of those listed in the book are foreign.
I love to make the
They've got Bren guns in here. I mean,
absolutely. Because who would blame them? If I could use a Bren gun, you're damn right I'd do it. Finest light machine gun of the Second World War. Anyway,
really? Hold on a minute. We can't just let you get away with saying that just lightly. Why, Marty, do you think the Bren gun was the finest light machine gun of the Second World War?
In terms of reliability and accuracy, and then the fact that the Bren had the rapid change barrel feature, those all combined.
Why is that good? Is that good rather than belt fed?
I think rapid change barrel feature. It is effectively an insurance policy that you're capable of a higher rate of sustained
barrel.
Power.
Sorry, you said rapid barrel.
Yeah, rapid barrel change. I also find that magazine changes are much more quickly executed than belt changes. And then also, whenever you have a light machine gun equipped that's feeding from a belt, you're suddenly adding something that's quite a bit more cumbersome and difficult to change and requires your assistant gunner who has to be attached at the hip to the main gunner. The Browning automatic rifle and the Bren gun both allow an automatic weapon to advance with an attacking echelon, which is a capability that is absolutely used over and over and over again. And it provides a great versatility in combat. The fact that the Bren gun provides a great advantage over the American BAR because the Bren gun, first of all, has a better bipod, a better sighting system, and you can change the barrels so that you can deliver a greater volume of sustained fire with Bren that you just can't with the BAR. I love the BAR, but it's just the World War II version it's just not great. The French version of the BAR, which is their Model 2429, is a better version. The Belgian version of the BAR is better. The Polish version of the BAR is better than the American version. But if I had,
but what about the M1919, the 30 caliber? I mean, I fired that one, and I was really impressed with just how completely solid it was. It was just.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a Browning machine gun, so it's effectively infallible. The only problem I believe is big Browning fan here. But the only problem with the 1919 is the early version is not a firearm that can advance with an attacking echelon, which is why there's so much interesting ingenuity that goes into attempting to develop an individually portable version of the 1919. We do that. Right. Marines in the Pacific begin modifying the aircraft 30 caliber Browning machine gun, which is almost a completely different weapon, although it uses the same operating system. They begin modifying it with BAR bipods, with M1 Garand butt stocks, by attaching 100 round belts. They're using aircraft guns as ground weapons with higher cyclic rates of fire. And it's because there was a desperation to have a belt-fed machine gun that can move forward with the attacking echelon and can be brought into action quickly. And those are things that you can't do with a 1919 A4. Now, the 1919 A6, which we're using for the first time in combat in the Netherlands with Operation Market Garden, that is a dramatic improvement over the situation. But the firearm is on the heavy side. The firearm it's a little bit on the long side as well. And when it comes down to it, I would rather have a Bren than the 1919 A6.
There you go. Okay, so that was a little in praise of the Bren interruption to the main theme, which is German machine guns in Normandy.
You mentioned that book, and it's great because I have so many times in the past been challenged to defend why it's important to learn all of these hyper-technical facts. And I believe that there's an importance to it because when you embrace a book like that, something that the average reader is not going to consume, it reveals something that's extremely important, and I think it's extremely important for the Normandy battle, specifically for Omaha Beach, because when you read that book, it brings you into a greater understanding of the extent to which the Third Reich was a kleptocratic state that could only supply the size of its expanded military with things that it stole from everybody. And it's not a matter of the Germans chose to use their captured foreign weapons. The Germans had to use their captured foreign weapons because German ordnance industries were insufficient to produce the total number of rifles, pistols, submachine guns, and machine guns that they needed to take on the world like they did.
Yeah.
And I love it specifically when it relates to the Normandy battle, because in Normandy, the deeper I read into the subject, the more I find there's lots and lots of foreign guns there. And I think that's important because I find that when I take bus tours to Normandy, back before 2020, but when I take bus tours to Normandy and we get out and we start to talk about it, everyone assumes that every German had a K98, an MG42, or an MP40.
Yeah. And they also say, yeah, okay, so we know that the kind of the infantry division, the 914th or 16th or whatever it was not much cop, was not much cop. But just at the last minute, and without the Americans realizing, the elite 352nd Infantry Division.
352nd.
And you sort of go, yeah, I'm sorry, on absolutely no spectrum could you call the 352nd elite.
Right.
I mean,
right.
You just couldn't under any circumstances. But this is all part of the myth, isn't it? Of these sort of square-jawed Germans, these automatons with their MG42s and their eliteness and their superior training and their superior tactical flair and all the rest of it, and it's just absolute bollocks.
It really is. I mean, they're a paper tiger. Everyone likes to believe in this absurdity that the men, I always use this construction, it's a little awkward, but I always say the men in German uniforms in Normandy, because the men in German uniforms in Normandy, as you know, were only about 50% German. Yes. There's an enormous number, an enormous number of foreigners in the German military. Not the least, the thing that I often mention at Point de Hoc that blows people's minds is I mention the number of Italians that are depicted in the photographic evidence of the Point de Hoc battle. And it's Italians who were probably there as laborers, but there's some Italians that are doing some fighting. There's this wide diversity among the men in German uniforms in Normandy. They're speaking multiple different foreign languages. German is probably spoken more than anything. And they're fighting with weapons that the Third Reich has captured from all over Europe. And they're some of the finest weapons in the entire world at the time. And it's not just rifles, pistols, submachine guns. It's artillery pieces as well. If I could flip forward, just to flip through the exhibits quickly, you're seeing Exhibit C, the French-made Model 1931 Rebelle machine gun. If you go to D, Exhibit E,
so that's a Hotchkiss.
F, Hotchkiss Model 1914s. And why are the Germans using it? Because it's a damn good machine gun. That's why the Germans are using it. I threw in Exhibit H, and I love the photo with you're seeing glider pilots, and I think it's mainly glider pilots and some wounded being evacuated from Utah. And down in the corner where I have a yellow arrow, you're seeing a couple of rifles leaned up against the gunnel of the landing craft. One of them's a K98, and one of them is a Soviet SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle. And
look at that.
Yeah, and in the area where the German 709th Static Division was fighting, there are a very large number of captured Soviet small arms. And here's one piece of evidence. I have a bunch of documentary evidence that's showing that there were PPSH-41 submachine guns being used by the men in German uniforms in the area of the 709th Division. Yeah. I use that all the time, and I think it's so informative because of this weird preconception that I find that the average enthusiast brings into a visit to Normandy. When they make the pilgrimage, they get there, they imagine that they're all square-jawed Aryans that are all fighting with the finest weapons on the planet Earth. That's another...
And they're the best trained army in the world and all this kind of stuff. But Marty, I think a part of that is because a lot of this comes from memoirs and oral history programs and all the rest of it, where, they talk about these crowds with their MG42s or their Spandaus or whatever, and they're all these Germans, and, it's kind of, then there's Hollywood, you add that in as well, obviously. But also, for the guys that were there, that sort of, it's almost kind of sort of a validation of their effort and the losses that they clearly did experience.
Right.
You don't want to describe that you came up against a bunch of sort of half-wit kind of guys from kind of Latvia and the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, who had been kind of sort of forced into fighting with crappy weapons that they didn't like and all the rest of it. I mean, because that's not part of the kind of the story. So you kind of, in the telling, you're kind of sort of going to big up your own experience. And that's not casting any kind of aspersions on the memory of these veterans or casting any aspersions against their bravery and courage for what they're doing, because clearly, it takes balls of steel to kind of do what they're doing. But that is where a lot of that comes from, and it's what we all know is that it doesn't matter that they've got foreign machine guns. It doesn't matter that they're in German uniforms rather than all German and square-jawed and with amazing tactical flair. It doesn't matter here and there, because that is still a hell of an opposition. I mean,
Right.
That is still a very, very dangerous environment in which you're kind of being flung into, fraught with risk and fraught with the kind of possibilities that you would be maimed forevermore, if not dead. So it's still but it is up to historians to tell the correct version, the correct story.
That it is, because otherwise you take away from this impression that the Third Reich was broader and more powerful than it actually was. That's why I love to, in the area around Utah Beach, I love to talk about the 795th Georgian Battalion and discuss this process of mongrelization within the German military that begins, and it becomes multilingual and multinational very quickly as it takes on broader and broader objectives that are beyond the capabilities of the Reich itself.
Well, and serving as a sort of ironic riposte to its aims as well. That you end up with a multicultural, multilingual army fighting the cause of a monocultural, monolingual master race. So immediately proving the impossibility of its aim, it's got to resort to a thing that is anathema to itself.
Absolutely.
I mean, which is Germany by the end of the war, there are more foreign people in Germany, more languages being spoken on the street in Hamburg, for instance, than there have ever been in all of German history. Yeah. In the service of this idea of a monoculture. I mean, so often in history, ironies pop up and abound, but there's a thicket of ironies surrounding the history of the Third Reich. I mean, you have to slash your way through them. I mean, James, your point though. I mean, after all, a bullet coming at you, it doesn't really matter if it's come out of a stolen Soviet submachine gun or an MP40, does it? I mean,
a bullet's a bullet. If it's going to kill you,
the bullet's a bullet in this situation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the other part of to come back to the Saving Private Ryan thing, because I think this is a very interesting thing, that this is the sort of lots of people's entry point to the story of Normandy. The other thing I think is really interesting, and I think this comes from The Longest Day as much as it does from anything else, which I suppose is your pre-Private Ryan, is The Longest Day, as the people's take on D-Day. And it's interesting that, in fact, in that film, the British feature majorly, whereas in Saving Private Ryan, you've the one conversation about Montgomery. Marnie's overrated, says Ted Danson from Cheers. And you think, what are you on about? Like, as if you'd have been having that conversation anyway. But the Normandy campaign begins and ends with D-Day for a lot of people in their imagination and in their understanding of the battle in Northwest Europe. That there's this one big, and it's a lot of that comes to us the way that we commemorate it. We make an enormous fuss of D-Day. We don't talk about anything beyond that, really, in this country. People don't know there was a Battle of Normandy. They don't know about, about fillets, about the Cobra, about the breakouts and all that stuff. They're just not registering for people. And after all, we've talked about this on the podcast a lot, is that whatever happens on Omaha and whatever happens on Utah, it's what then happens inland that's where the casualties are really taken, and the guys get off Utah without too much trouble, but then things go very...
We talked about that, didn't
Fourth
we?
Infantry, things go very nasty for the 4th
within
Infantry.
2 weeks,
they're off 100% casualties, or through rate, at least, turnover. So, I mean, is that a thing that you have to deal with when you're doing your battlefield tours? Are people astonished there's even anything after D-Day?
Absolutely. I mean, for me to get them past June 6th is almost an impossibility. I am really pushing hard because Lafayette was 3 chapters in my first book, and I kind of love the Lafayette battle, and I asked too much to get them to stay with me through June 9th. It's asking too much. And amazing. I have been involved in hundreds of television shows during the last 20 years, and I've pitched a bunch of them. And I actually pitched a show that we titled The Days After D-Day that was intended to bring attention to the time period post June 6th. And what did the producers do? They talked about the boys from Bedford. 45 minutes of a 1-hour show was talking about Omaha Beach, Boys from Bedford, and things that happened on June 6th. And there's, as you have already mentioned, James, there's this overwhelming emphasis on June 6th alone, to the point where we don't pay attention to the other 99 days of the 100 days of the Normandy campaign. And I sneak it in sometimes, because in recent years I've shifted over to the groups. Just because of competition for hotel space, we were staying at Barneville Carteret on the west coast of the peninsula, and so that would necessarily require us to go, as the bus left the main D-Day commemorative area and we moved toward the west coast, we would drive through places like Saint-Savelle-le-Vicomte, and we would go through areas around like Nehu and toward Montcastre, and I would begin talking about these battles that occurred after the 6th, and I would watch people on the bus get comfortable and fall asleep.
Well, I've got to say, Marty, next April, assuming we're able to do it, I'm doing my one annual tour to Normandy. And I said I'll only do this if I could do the whole Normandy campaign and not just D-Day. So we're actually starting in the UK. We're doing a bit of kind of sort of, pre-invasion stuff, and then we're going to of course we're going to do the beaches and all that kind of crap. But we end up at Montormel. We end up at the we're doing sort of Lambert-sur-Dive and the Falaise Gap and Mortagne, and and we go over and do Cobra and Bluecoat. Breakout is just such a fantastic operation. It's so interesting.
Absolutely.
And we're doing all that stuff, so it's great. I'm thrilled about it, and I'm glad to say we've got some takers on that. So hopefully we can do it again. Nice. But I would love to do that with you one day. I mean, God, that'd be great.
That would be fun. That would be like what I end up doing mostly is like the bus tour, which is a little bit of a cattle call. The bus tour cattle call is emphasis on the beachhead. It's really what they've turned into in the recent era is you got to do the beachhead stuff, and then they want you to slip in some Band of Brothers. My first book was about the 507th Parachute Infantry, so I really enjoy talking about the 82nd Airborne Division drop zone areas, and so I slide that in. I watch their interest begin to drop as soon as I stop talking about beaches and Band of Brothers. Their interest level starts to drop. It then becomes incumbent on me to be dynamic and interesting, which I'm not. So big challenge there. But what happens is there are typically dedicated people on the bus that then circle back to me after the fact. And we go for what I then call the master's degree course or the advanced course. And we come back and we'll end up at Saint-Lambert-sur-Dive and Montormel. And we'll talk about the things that matter the most, I think, in Normandy. And we'll talk about Breakout. I rarely get to do it, and I've not been able to do it at all in 2020. But for a small select audience, they're interested in consuming more information about it. For the broader audience, they want to kind of keep it to the main talking points.
Yeah, there's this great little place for the Breakout from After Cobra. I think it's called Saint-Denis-le-Gast. And it's the first. Suddenly, because the Germans are in full retreat after Cobra, they're having to move by daylight, and suddenly for the tactical air force, this is kind of this is rats in a barrel time. And Saint-Denis-le-Gast, there's this. You can go up there, and it's one of the roads leading into it is just this kind of complete choke point, isn't it? That where it's toe to bumper kind of horses, carts, panthers, stugs, trucks, everything everything that can move in the German army is sort of heading southwards, and they just get caught, and it's an absolute slaughter. I mean, it's like the kind of road leading up to Montormel, and Saint-Lambert and stuff, but just a couple of weeks earlier, a few weeks earlier. And it's fascinating there, and now if you go, it's just a little kind of sleepy little Normandy village, and you'd never know that, but it's a great place to go and visit because it's exactly the place that no one would ever think of going, but actually is a really important moment in the Normandy campaign, because you suddenly see the kind of Germans just starting to kind of implode a bit here, and it's all going badly wrong, and you can see why the Allies are suddenly why they're dominating now that they've broken this kind of attritional period, because of they can use their air power so much more effectively than they could before. That's great.
A fun thing is you just mentioned air power. One thing I love talking about when I'm in Normandy with my tour groups is the extent to which the Luftwaffe was actually a meaningful part of the air battle by night, for the most part. Because I'm finding that the same people that think everybody was German, everyone carried an MP-40 or an MG-42, they believe that core mythology that was taught to them by the longest day, that there was no presence of Luftwaffe whatsoever in the skies above Normandy. And it's fascinating to challenge that with them when I talk about the extent to which the Luftwaffe owned the night sky, but didn't really so much own the day sky. And that I find that by the time I get done with sort of challenging everything they've ever known, that people they react in one of two ways. They either react with hostility toward it, like, well, who the hell are you and where'd you get this information? Or they embrace it and want to learn more.
Yep.
Well, we could do. I know we could do this forever. Marty, thank you so much for joining us to talk. We're going to have you back, aren't we? We're going to have Marty back, aren't we, James?
Yeah, if he's willing to, yeah, definitely.
If he's
100%.
willing, able and willing.
But I tell you what, I mean, you started mentioning kind of hardware that you have back home in Louisiana, and I'm my ears pricked up. I'm not going to lie.
Well.
Next time in Louisiana, you might find an unwanted guest kind of knocking at your door.
Well, come by. I have access to a private piece of property about an hour north of New Orleans, and I don't have everything, but I have almost everything.
Wow!
So,
wow!
Fantastic.
You would be welcome.
Well, thank you,
both of you.
Thank you so much, Marty. Thanks for talking to us. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you again soon. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Bye now.